Okay, so lecture 2 is the organic macromolecules. I recommend going to tutoring. I recommend coming to my office hours. I recommend looking at the lecture exam review sheet so that you can figure out what is important to know or how to organize this stuff to kind of work through it as well. Okay, so let me get everything set up. All right, so organic macromolecules. So what the heck are organic macromolecules, you ask? Good question. They are carbs, lipids, proteins, and enzymes are a part of proteins, and then nucleic acids. So ATP derived substances, DNA and RNA, okay? So our macromolecules would be our carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. I recommend doing the nutrition assignment. So start working on it this week and tracking what you're eating and doing your calculations so that if you have any questions, you can ask me. But that should tie along with this PowerPoint. Okay, how do I move forward? Okay, so organic macromolecules are compounds that are comprised of carbon, hydrogen, usually oxygen, and sometimes nitrogen. All right. Organic chemicals that are found in living things come in 4 categories. So carbohydrates, we're all familiar with carbs. Carbohydrates consist of sugars, which could be simple sugars or complex sugars, right? And starches. Typically starches come from plants, like when you think of potato or wheat. Lipids is the next category. Those are our fats. So when we think of lipids, we think of triglycerides, which are typically our animal fats. Phospholipids hold our cell membranes together, and steroids are from cholesterol. Proteins are the next group. They are what our muscles are made of. They're made up of amino acids, and then we have nucleic acids like RNA and DNA. All of these are called macromolecules. Macromolecules are made up of monomers. So mono means what, guys? Mono means?
One.
Perfect. And when you combine a monomer and a monomer together, you have a dimer. And when you combine a lot of monomers together, you have polymers, right? So glucose would be an example of a monomer. That's just one sugar. When you stick many glucose together, you form glycogen, and glycogen is a polymer. Okay, so how do we stick these guys together? I want you to know the basic reactions. So what is a dehydration synthesis reaction? And then what is a hydrolysis reaction? You covered these somewhat in chemistry, but let me put it a different way for your body, right? So let's say we want to add an amino acid. Let's say this is an amino acid, and we want to stick it on a chain of amino acids. All right, how do we get this one amino acid to stick with this chain? We use an enzyme, right? So there's going to be some type of an enzyme that's going to catalyze a reaction, and we'll talk about those in a second. And so I'm just assuming there's an enzyme there, even though it's not noted. But in order to get this amino acid stuck to this chain of amino acids, I'm going to use an enzyme, and I'm going to pull off water. Okay, so we're going to kick out water. When you pull off water, when you pull the H off of one chain and the OH off of the other one, you force this bond to occur. Okay, so dehydration synthesis. What does dehydration mean? Increase in water or loss of water?
Loss of water.
Good, loss of water. So you're pulling water off and you're synthesizing a bond. So when you hear dehydration synthesis, I want you to think of pulling off water and synthesizing a bond, okay? So you're forcing this bond to occur. When we talk about hydrolysis, hydrolysis is breaking up a polymer or breaking up a molecule by adding water. So hydrolysis is adding water and with an enzyme, and that's going to rip apart the bond, right? So you're going to break apart this bond by adding water and an enzyme. So you're sticking the water effectively. Here's your H and your OH, right? But in simple terms, Dehydration is using an enzyme to pull water out to force a bond. Hydrolysis is adding water plus an enzyme to break apart a bond or rip apart a bond. Okay. And this is how we go through all these molecules. So that's how we break apart molecules in our body, and that's how we add molecules together in our body to, let's say, repair a cell membrane or make some type of molecule that we need. Okay, let's talk about the different categories then. So carbohydrates. Carbs are a major source of energy for your body, right? Your body uses carbs first for fuel. It prefers to use carbs for fuel. So it'll use carbs if it can. The chemical formula for all carbohydrates are 1 carbon to 2 hydrogens to 1 oxygen, right? So it's a 1 to 2 to 1. When you think of glucose, glucose is C6. How many hydrogens? If there's 2 times. Go ahead, 12. And then how many oxygens are there?
6.
Perfect, 6. So C6H12O6, and that is glucose, okay? The energy is actually stored in the bonds between the carbons and the hydrogens and the oxygens. Glucose is a monosaccharide. Mono means 1, saccharide means sugar. It's a single ring structure. Okay, so glucose is a simple sugar. It's a monosaccharide. Here's different forms of glucose. Here's what it actually looks like. So here's your first carbon, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth carbon. When we use this, or excuse me, let me back up. So this is a monosaccharide. This is 1 sugar. How do we know it's a sugar? Just by the form. The shape of it. I'm not going to ask you the chemical formula of this, okay? So this is not chemistry. I'm not going to ask you to identify it. I'm not going to ask you what the composition is, but I will expect you to know that glucose is a simple sugar, okay? And so when we rip apart this in metabolism, we're going to break bonds. And when we break bonds, that gives us energy. And so that's how we get energy ultimately from our breaking down our food sources. Examples of monosaccharides. I would like you to know these examples of monosaccharides. So glucose is a monosaccharide. It's a 1-ring sugar. Galactose is another example of a monosaccharide. And fructose is a 5-ringed sugar. It has 6 carbons, but it's a 5-ring. So we call this a pentose. Glucose, we will convert everything to glucose in order to pull it into our bloodstream. Fructose is the sugar that's found in fruit. So when you think of fruit like apples, bananas, etc., that's what we find in the sugar that's found in fruit. So these 3 are examples of monosaccharides. Disaccharides are 2 simple sugars stuck together, right? So using a dehydration synthesis. So disaccharides would be, an example of a disaccharide would be sucrose. Sucrose is glucose and fructose stuck together. So glucose is stuck together using dehydration synthesis to fructose. And these together make sucrose, which is a disaccharide. Sucrose is table sugar. And so table sugar is a disaccharide. It's glucose and fructose stuck together, and it's really sweet. Humans like the taste of sucrose a lot. The more you eat too, the more you get desensitized to it, just like salt. You eat a lot of salt, you get desensitized to it. And so when you pull it away from your diet, you kind of have to let your body regulate itself to get used to that. Maltose is glucose and glucose stuck together, and lactose is glucose and galactose stuck together. So we make these disaccharides by sticking 2 monomers together, or 2 monosaccharides together. Lactose is found in where? What do we think of when we think of lactose?
Milk.
Good. So lactose is found in milk. That's the sugar that's found in milk. Go ahead, Nicole.
Oh no, that was it.
This sugar is sometimes people have a really hard time breaking this down. They're lactose intolerant. And so if you don't have the enzymes to break down this sugar, in your digestive tract, then the bacteria break it down for you and they make a lot of gas and a lot of acid, and you have a lot of cramping and gas and diarrhea and bloating, and it's not fun. This doesn't mean that you're allergic to milk, allergies, or immune response. It just means that you don't have enough lactase enzyme to break this down. My husband is severely lactose intolerant. I'm not lactose intolerant, but I think a lot of people, I came from Wisconsin, and a lot of people from the upper Midwest came from Norway and Denmark and whatnot, and Scandinavia and Germany. And so they tend to be able to break down lactose a little bit more. My husband is Hispanic. His family's from Mexico, and so they don't break down lactose as much, just because it's not something that is commonly found in their diet. And so it's really interesting to look at how people developed enzymes to break down certain things or not, depending on where their ancestors originated from. Good. Okay, so this is just a generic example. So here's sucrose. You can add the sucrase enzyme plus water. So it's going to go through a hydrolysis reaction to break apart that bond. And then you can use the glucose. And so when we take in table sugar, our small intestine actually breaks it apart into glucose and fructose. And then we pull it in and use the glucose for fuel. Good. Complex carbohydrates would be polysaccharides. Polysaccharides are many monosaccharides stuck together. We form a polysaccharide by dehydration synthesis. We should have more polysaccharides in our diet than simple sugars because they take more time to digest because they're so long. So for example, glycogen is a storage form of glucose in our skeletal muscle and liver. Starch is a storage form of glucose in plants. The more complex carbohydrates or polysaccharides we have, the better it is. If we can always compare, or if we can always pair some type of fiber, plant cellulose, with like a simple sugar, like let's say fruit, or some type of protein with some type of simple sugar, it's going to slow down digestion. And so your blood sugar isn't going to spike as quickly. And so the idea is whenever you're eating something, to pair a complex carb with a simple carb, or, a protein with a simple carb, because it's going to slow down digestion and absorption. So your blood sugar isn't going to spike as well, or as quickly as if you ate, some sugar. Here's what glycogen looks like. So it's really pretty. It's a glucose molecule bound to a glucose molecule bound to a glucose molecule. And it's just this chain of glucose molecules. So glycogen is just a complex chain of glucose molecules. That's all it is. Here's glycogen this is supposed to be skeletal muscle, even though it's fried chicken. So glycogen is found in skeletal muscle. It's also found in our liver. Starch is the storage form of glucose in plants. And so we eat the starch from the potatoes or from the peas or whatever we're eating. Cellulose is a complex carb that you can't digest. And so we consider fiber. Cellulose is fiber, and so fiber means we can't break it down. There's soluble fiber, and then there's insoluble fiber. Soluble fiber, like oat bran, what you get from eating beans and from veggies and fruit. This stuff, once it hits a digestive tract, it actually sort of forms a gel and slows down digestion and actually prevents you from digesting the cholesterol and some of the fats. It actually helps with pulling cholesterol out of the body too. So it's really interesting. The fiber that you can't break down, like if you eat celery or carrots, that fiber, the veins of celery, that stuff is just going to push through your digestive tract and help keep it regular. And so those are different types of fiber that are important. If we compare them, so simple versus complex carbs, simple carbs are digested quickly, they're mono or disaccharides. This is I don't agree with that. they do contain some additional nutrients, especially if you're dealing with milk or yogurt, right? Or fruits. But simple carbs digested quickly, complex carb digested slowly. Polysaccharides would be an example of this. If I'm climbing a mountain, so if I'm going hiking and I'm climbing a mountain and I feel really, really tired and fatigued, which fuel am I going to use? Am I going to use a simple carb or a complex carb? What do you think? What's my preferred fuel source when I'm climbing a mountain?
Simple carb?
Yeah. So if I feel like I'm pooping out, I'm gonna eat some sugar, some glucose tablets or something, or have some raisins or some fruit, something that I can break down really quick to get energy to my muscles. If I'm at home, just sitting on my butt, I'm gonna have some complex carbohydrates because I want them to slow down and provide sustained energy. If I'm studying, I want well, that's not true. If I'm studying, I want a little bit of sugar to get that brain going, and then I want some long carbs. Okay. So carbs, these guys are important, nutrients are really important. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop. Let me see. I'm going to stop there. We're going to start at lipids on Wednesday. So I'm going to stop there, and it's your job to remind me that we're covering lipids next lecture. Okay. Oops. Okay, guys. Any questions?
Will we be going over the conversion sheet on Wednesday?
Yeah, ask me. We'll do that in lab. We'll do that in lab. Okay. All right. I'm going to go and grab my plug because my computer's about to die. So I am going to end this and then I'll log back in. I want the recording to let me hit stop.